Start right now. Hey everybody, sit back, enjoy it or not enjoy it, cringe through it, whatever the case may be. Hopefully the people that are here will hear the message, and the people that want to hear the message will stay. So, and I'm using Eurocoins because Two Spirit gave me permission to do that for the things. So, a nation's economy is important. The economic system used by the Iroquois was known as a cooperative community system. Everyone shared in the work. They helped each other. Since it was not a competitive system, there was no super rich, no poor. There was no tension, frenzy, panic, envy, jealousy, and hate. There was some private enterprises. If the entrepreneur didn't make out, he merely joined the cooperative. The white man's economic system features a competitive spirit. It is a constant and never-ending struggle to get ahead. There are rich and super rich. The failures of this system find themselves in the streets, scorning in garbage, scrounging in garbage cans for something to eat. Even doctors, lawyers, and other professional people have to come upon evil times and become street people. It can happen to anyone under capitalism. There's no publicity when a street person dies of starvation. It's a shame on the country's economic system. Millions of people are living in the streets of the richest country on earth, the U.S. The white man has other economic systems, such as communism, where the production and distribution is shared equally by the people. Communist countries were communist for a few years before the fascists stepped in and took over. Fascism is an economic system where the government is the boss of production and distribution. According to the dictionary, capitalism means the economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately owned and operated for profit. Small enterprises are also allowed. When the production and distributions are turned into cash, the government steps in and takes the cash in the form of excessive or exorbitant taxation. Capitalism then is fascism in subtle disguise. So the cooperative economic community is the safest system for indigenous nations to use. What is the Warrior Society? The great law of peace called them the war chief and his men. The term Warrior Society was supplied by the white man. The term seems to fit nicely. The great law is definite functions of the war chief and his men. They are charged with the defense and protection of the people. Their duties take many forms: keeping the peace, teaching, public speaking, repossessing lost land and human rights, taking care of confrontations, settling dangerous disputes and international negotiations, and doing all kinds of work to promote the welfare of the people. The Rotenir Shonen of the National Council are chiefs of peace and are chosen for their wisdom and intelligence to legislate laws and make decisions on political issues. They have to be mild, calm, and peaceful types in order to make just laws. It's against the law, the great law of the Ronir, to participate in the disturbance or conflict, as taking care of such is the function of a war chief, his men. In the event of war, if the Ronira wishes to take part in the struggle, he must first depose himself from the chieftainship in the National Council, go in as a simple warrior, and take orders from the war chief. After the war is over, if he is physically intact and well, he may resume his duty as peaceful chief. There have been objections by some well-meaning indigenous peoples against having a warrior society. Quote, "There is no war," they say. "Nothing could be further from the truth. There has been a constant psychological war waged against the natives of America, right from the start of the European occupation of they use the R word, man's land. It's as deadly as the one with guns. It's war against the minds of the people, and the casualties are the drug addicts, drunks, and self-unalivers, which are at the highest among the indigenous peoples. The Europeans went on all-out drive to give natives an inferiority complex, which destroyed the personality of the people. Oppression is an act of war against the people. Legislating the indigenous people into extinction by way of assimilation is an act of war against the indigenous peoples. Legal extermination of indigenous peoples as a distinct people is an act of aggression. Genocide as a practice against the indigenous peoples is an act of war, and the indigenous peoples must act in self-defense. The answer is the Warrior Society, those whose task force is charged with finding ways to protect the people from every form of aggression being waged against them. The traditional peace chief, the Rotinarashan, as well as Canada's Indigenous Act Band Council, are not oriented to strife, the confrontational violence. They are politicians and not military people. This is why the Great Law has peaceful functions for them. The war chief, by nature, and trained as is fit to deal with violence and aggression. The Warrior Society is trained to deal with every kind of emergency, from invasion to childbirth. The modern phenomenon in the Warrior Society is the presence of girls and older women within its ranks. The distaff aside has taken to the study of weapons of war and has become experts in their use. The Warrior Society is actually a power of the people in action. The indigenous struggle for survival has many sides. One of the most important is to counteract the psychological war inflicted on indigenous people. This calls for talented men and women. Yes, women have the important place in the Warrior Society to speak publicly and write tracts describing the rights of the people and the best way to fight for survival. It's called propaganda, and it's important in any warfare, psychological or physical. Words of encouragement and pep talks are a big help. There are indigenous peoples walking around dazed and confused, suffering from identity conflict as a result of the psychological warfare. To fight any kind of war, one needs courage, gumption, knowledge of the enemy, and strategic planning. The biggest struggle requires a fighting spirit. People with fighting spirit shall not become casualties of psychological war. Only 10% of any population will actively fight for their rights. How does one acquire fighting spirit? Our ancestors discovered the secret long ago. All their men were great warriors, 100%. How did they do it? Where they were naturally all great warriors, or where they developed. They must have been developed because at present we who inherited their blood are also heirs to 10% population fighting spirit. The method that has come down to use is the war dance. Our ancestors raised the spirit of the people by the war dance, even of those who did not dance. Since it works, it should be performed at every opportunity. Publicity is another important work of the Warrior Society. Artists have the job of making words and picture posters, signs, and billboards, given all kinds of useful information to the general public. And that's the same same thing that Mao Zedong talked about during the Chinese Revolution, that how those are important for propaganda of the working class to bring on the revolutions and to overthrow the government of the Kuomintang. Whenever and as often as necessary, a press conference should be held to acquaint the general public everywhere with any important developments among indigenous peoples, so that any actions of indigenous peoples shall be clear and understandable to all. Many friends and support groups were made that way. The Warrior Society is a big entity in the life of the indigenous nations, just as an army is important to all other nations of the world. Not having an army is unthinkable to any nation. They would be speedily overcome. In any international dispute, no nation has a chance in negotiation if it hasn't got defense and protection. It should be negotiating from the position of weakness. Likewise, one of these days, indigenous nations shall find themselves engaged in a matter of life and death negotiations with white men's governments. And if they have no bargaining power, they're licked right from the start. They shall be forced to make concessions and back down on their demands. The government may even refuse to negotiate, if only negotiates when its peace is in danger. The indigenous nation, with no warrior society present, no threat to white man's peace, the negotiation which shall arise, and when the survival dispute becomes hot, the warrior society is going to be the bargaining power. To have bargaining power, the negotiating nation shall not only have the power to make peace, which anybody can do, even the weakest, since they can do nothing else, but the negotiating nation should also have the ability to destroy the peace of the opposition. That's bargaining power. How can the warrior society destroy the peace of any opposing nation, no matter how powerful it may be? That's in the realm of strategy, not open to discussion here. Nations negotiate to achieve peace, usually only temporary. Hostilities stop for a while. No peace has lasted forever. People tell us the only way to peace for indigenous peoples is through peaceful means. The indigenous people are urged to approach a peace-destroying white man with white honey drip tones to talk to him and make him a better white man and his government a better government. Unknown to each other, all indigenous groups have been doing this for the last 200 years. This is frustrating to the good folks who are doing it the good way, the Creator's way to achieve peace, justice, and a good life. It should be so obvious to anyone with a grain of righteousness that peace through peaceful means is the good and the only way, but it doesn't work. Why? Who has and enjoys any peace? We have seen that the meek, mild, and humble people are the most trampled upon. They don't want to hurt anybody. They don't want any trouble. They are peaceful, but they don't have or enjoy any peace. They do not, cannot, and shall not fight back against any injustice or oppression. What a sweet setup for bullies. These same bullies do not bully the strong and fighting people. They may get more than they can give. It's the strong who get any peace. The peace-destroying bullies are only peaceful when the strong are around. The world is that way. Only fear is respected. Fear inspired by the strong. Indigenous nations without... Hold on a second. Just going to look back real quick. Let me look at the thing. I don't support Pol Pot. I will not say. You will not say. No worries. Seeing who I missed. Fuck Trump. He's his supporters. Okay, great. Yeah, fuck Trump and their supporters. Got it. Easy peasy. Hello.
What I
Hello.
meant was just real quick that I will not say what that strategy is to dismantle them, yeah, on a live.
No, no, no. That's OPSEC. Indigenous nations without a warrior society are in a weak position. They are also fear-ridden. People in fear are often very vocal and infect others with their fear. Fear is so infectious that there is a record of 2 indigenous nations so fear-ridden that they committed self-unaliving after killing off their young to evade the Spanish, who slaughtered 12 million natives Americans in the first 20 years of their crusade in America. People in fear inspire no respect, only petty mixed of contempt with contempt. They are ripe for extinction, for only those who struggle grow strong and survive. Indigenous peoples who do not have a warrior society do not struggle, decrease in number, die out, and become extinct. Lessons of history. When an indigenous nation revives its warrior society, there is a immediate change. The nation immediately feels stronger. Hope for future survival is renewed. Just like in any type of revolutionary situation, the people need to develop a people's army. Just like the Mohawk Warrior Society. We got to develop a people's army in different stratifications and stuff to fight for the good of the people. For the good of the people, just like the Warrior Society. This is exactly how Mao and how the Russian Revolution and how other revolutions set up their societies. They had a rank and file. They had a people's army to fight against the big armies of the big bad imperialist nations. Their struggle is no longer weak. Their strength grows every day. This is reflected in their spirit and speech. They become impressive. They soon inspire uncertainty in their oppressors. They then, because their oppressors are paper tigers, they have given you this. That's why when you relieve your chains and you become more conscious of the objective realities of the world, you see the paper tigers and you see how weak they actually really are. Negotiate for. The most important is to regain enough land to enable them to live by their own efforts and exercise their own traditional government and society. For example, the land of the Hanaki and the Sonuri. Ooh, I don't know this word. Seigniorory. We're going to look that up. Do you know what that is by any chance? That's not indigenous. That's just a word, right? Yeah, I'm going to look it up.
Once I see it, it's hard for me when someone spells that.
It is Sangari, which means, let's go to the effects. Hopefully you can find it. Which means feudal lordships, positions, authority, or domain of a feudal lord. Interesting. Now I have to go back to, there it is. Examples of the land. And the Sangaris is not the extent of the Mohawk land. There are 9 million acres in New York State and Vermont. It extends into the province of Quebec from the Canadian-U.S. border up to and including Montreal. All Indigenous people should work to regain whatever they can of their total areas. Indigenous people should strive to achieve a state no less than a republic, as the term is defined in the white man's dictionary. And this is where Marx talks about like the republics and shit too. procedure of rebuilding. According to Wampum 59 of the Great Law, the People's Council has the most power and the last say. They may thus, number one, convene the People's Council, make public the violations of Wampum 25 and Wampum 58 of the Great Law, Hemsum Lake Code, a violation of the Great Law. Guilty chiefs should be deposed and banished, along with other people who are also guilty. The guilt can save themselves by declaring solemnly on the pledge of wampum to defend, protect, and follow the Iroquois Constitution, the Great Law, and not to ever disobey the law again. So they get a choice. The People's Council should install and swear in, hold pledge wampum new chiefs who are loyal to the Great Law. Their first action in council should be to repeal Wampum 74 and 77 and to enact new laws permitting new member nations into the Iroquois Confederacy as equal partners, voice, and authority, who shall make the necessary pledge on the wampum to follow the Great Law and to defend and protect each and every member nation. 3. The second act in council should be to make the Tuscarora Nation Tuscarora Nation, yes, a full partner in the Iroquois Confederacy. Presently, it makes up the Six Nation, but because of Wampum 74 and 77, has not given equality. The above are suggestions by the writer to help out in the work to removing the deplorable conditions and sad state of affairs. May the superior minds in the Six Nation and among the other indigenous nations come to the fore with more suggestions. The whole idea must first be presented to the people of the Iroquois Confederacy with the explanation that it was originally the plan of the founder of the Confederacy himself, Dangana Weda. The plan was diverted after the founder went missing. He did not return with more nations to join the alliance of indigenous nations. It is necessary for the people of the Six Nations to revoke Wampum 74 and 77 to open up their Iroquois alliance for other indigenous nations to join. So you guys are still in the midst of other indigenous nations and joining the Confederacy to consolidate everything, to bring on the revolutionary process more.
Yeah, the ones they're specifically talking about are the ones that were added by greedy chiefs after the foundation, when the peacemaker was no longer there. And the people didn't decide on this. It was greedy chiefs. This is why we're saying that these have to be overturned, because these made it to where other nations were younger nations considered, and they didn't have as much say. And we're saying that they need to have just as much say. And that's what needs to be recognized, because that's what it was originally formed for, was when a nation joined, they were supposed to have just as much say as every other nation in that with the people. So the people are supposed to have just as much say. And these greedy chiefs added these in here. So we're saying this has to be repealed. It cannot no longer exist.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And it seems like in a sense that I can call the Federation, even though the parallel I can draw is like a united front. You know, all these nations uniting with each other. So that makes sense. That's the only parallel I can draw. But I think it's more than just united front. Honestly, I think there's more. Like reading this and listening to you, united front is like surface level. I get it. This seems more nuanced and more in depth. Because the United Front doesn't go away. It never goes away, because you're a people of nations. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. Really?
Correct.
Huh? You were going to say something. I think I interrupted you. I'm not sure. Oh well. There are many things all important for all the involved follow. The system of government devised by Danganawada himself is the greatest ever made. To fully understand and appreciate the system of the great law should often be read completely. The type of religion to be practiced by the projected huge confederacy of the indigenous nations is important. It has to be a national religion, for it is a force for unity and national survival. Now, religion, if you're not indigenous, religion is much different to indigenous religions are much different than the capitalist or the Christian or the Abrahamic faiths. They're way different. So, like, we have to also draw the distinction between religion in the white man's perception to religion in the indigenous perspective. And I don't know much about, all I know is like the things that I hear, the creation stories and the things that they utilize is pretty well dialectical in many cases. So like I would ask people that are non-indigenous to figure out what is the difference and what are the distinctions drawn that makes indigenous religion and white man's religion different. Even with black community too, much different. Some indigenous members of various white man's Christian sect. Christianity is an international religion and does not inspire unity and national survival. In two world wars, Catholics and Protestants slaughtered Catholics and Protestants by the millions. 9 million in World War I and 56 million in World War II. Catholic means universal. So it is international and not and power for unity and national survival. The Hampton Lake Code, being a copy of the white man's Quaker faith, is this category. Anyway, no evidence can be produced to prove the existence of hell, devils, purgatory, etc., etc. If the white man cannot prove that what he is saying, then he is not telling the truth. If he is not telling the truth, then he is telling lies. Dangana Wada urged the indigenous nations to continue practicing their own national religion, and it is even more necessary for indigenous peoples now. Look at the Jewish people, who have survived 3,000 years of inhumane persecution, given due credit to their national religion for their survival. Many of them do not believe in any kind of religion, but are members of the Jewish religion because it's a force of unity and survival. Indigenous peoples should do the same, join their national religion, even if they don't believe in any kind of religion. It's the most important route to unity and survival. And don't worry about the soul. It cannot suffer, weaken, or die. If there is punishment for evil deeds done in this life, there is no escape by being members of the most exalted religion on earth. Some of the worst criminals in history were members and even leaders of great religions. They say Schmittler was the most terrible man in all history, and he was a Roman Catholic. When it seemed certain he wasn't going to win the war, he was excommunicated by the church. Of course he was. When it was safe, baby, when it was safe, no one was going to irritate Adolf. Oh, he had most destructive force in the world in his hands. If there is a God up there in heaven, he cannot see all and knows all. And you're a God, and you're a good person. God, hold on. What have you got to worry about? Your religion doesn't have to be enormous and fantastically rich to be good. In fact, the fabulous wealth of the world's greatest churches defeats their own purpose. They were concerned with gathering filthy riches than with gathering filthy sinners. Since white man's religion are a failure, and the people they have made better are no better than they were when white man's religion began, we do now urge all indigenous peoples to drop out of white man's churches and return to their own natural national religions. If the indigenous nation wishes to join the projected alliances of indigenous nations, has lost its own national religion, and wishes to adopt one, the Mohawks or any other, would gladly demonstrate the Thanksgiving festival, marriage ceremonies, baby naming, funeral rites, etc. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Economic system. The Haudenosaunee, but they're using Iroquois, as well as other indigenous nations, used the cooperative economic system. The system was occupied by the Amish, Mennonites, and other groups. They succeeded in developing some well-off and well-run economic communities. These are restrictive religious groups, but there are other cooperative communities in the South that do not practice any religion at all, but who are equally as well-off and as well-run as the restrictive religious ones. The free world boasts of its democratic capitalist economic system. The U.S. claims to be the richest country in the world of all the bread baskets of the world. Yet 50 million lives at the subsistent level, 7 million in Canada. Millions live in the city streets in the U.S. and thousands in Canada. They scourge in garbage cans for something to eat, while the government dumps shiploads of wheat into the Pacific Ocean. Overproduction, quote unquote. They should dump the wheat on city streets so that the street people can make their own bread. It takes only a month to eat nothing to starve to death. When one victim goes, another takes its place. There is no end to this persecution, this possession of people who failed in this much vaunted capitalist economic system. We wonder if the communist countries have millions of people starving to death in their streets. It seems that no matter what type of ism the people attach to their government, the fascists take over. In communism, the theory is that the production of distribution is shared equally by all the people. They had that for a few short years when the fascists took over. In fascism, the production distribution of everything else is a special privilege of the government alone. Capitalism permits private ownership of resources, personal profits for businesses, etc. In capitalist democracy, the government waits until the production and distributions are turned into money to come out and take the money by exorbitant taxation. It's called quite a subtle fascism. Yes, the route to go for indigenous peoples is the cooperative economic system, which our ancestors followed. It benefits everyone. The first Grand Council were held in the open air, outdoors. In time they thought of council houses, but did not think of Grand Council longhouses. It is now time to think of it. It has to be a huge council house that belong to all the nations, and it has to be large enough to seat the chiefs of the 100+ nations and accommodate the people's gallery. So said building must be extendable. To be big, one must think big. The cost of the building should be shared by all member nations. According to the great law, such a council house would have to be in Onondaga territory because it's in a central location with only the Grand Council to be held there. All the nations have their own national longhouses to hold their own individual national councils. In the event that for some reason it cannot be built in Onondaga territory, then the second choice would be the Angawassengan territory, which has held 6 nation grand councils for the great number of years. If the Angawassengan has become unsuitable, then the place where the great law is supreme, Ganeshgan territory, may be arguable to all. Let us now leave it all in the hands of the people of the Iroquois Confederacy and protect 100+ nation confederacy of the future. And that's the end of that. Now we are on part 6, appendices. This section provides tools for understanding the context and the meaning of indigenous knowledge shared in this book. Span over 500 years of record history. The Mohawk Warrior History Timeline recounts the selection of landmark events of the evolution of the Haudenosaunee resistance for the first contact with Europeans to contemporary struggles, bolstering the genealogical understanding of the Warrior Society and providing the chronological narrative of its historical evolution. The Sangaweta Gangwin accept glossary suggests English translations and contextualized explanations for the indigenous words, the notions found in this book, as well as other important concepts. This lexicon is based on the explanation provided by the Tengara Tangane, whose intricate knowledge of the old words of his native tongue is a knowledge throughout the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Indicated alternatives etymological interpretations from other native speakers when necessary. This is followed by the list of traditional Haudenosaunee festivals and native names for the Confederacy nation. Finally, the, quote, place names of and people's names section reveal the geographic location of past and current Haudenosaunee territories, utilizing the indigenous Mohawk terms for place names, giving an idea as the extent of the Haudenosaunee historical presence and alliance networks on the territory, resisting colonial conceptions of broader spaces. This map does not delimit these territories into manual exclusive zones, but rather shows up an open space textured by the topographic and oceanographic features of the land. See, there's a Mohawk Warrior History Timeline. Sweet. So we're going to do historical materialism. Let me go back real quick. Just going back real quick, making sure. All right. Okay, here we go. Timeline immemorable. The Gunnery Hoganawa. According to the story, the bloody war was raging among the 5 neighboring Iroquoian speaking nations in ancient times, spearheaded by death-worshipping snake-haired Onondagan chief Thado Ganho the Entangled, a man called Danganawada, living in the vicinity of Wendata Dindinga heard about the turmoil ripping Iroquois apart and overtook to travel there and helped his neighbors make peace. The peacemaker, which is Ganawada, was thereafter known as the peacemaker. On his way, he Jagan Kanahasi, she who is a new face, a woman who lived along the path where warriors traveled and who offered them shelter regardless of their allegiance. Jego Ganahasi imparted to Danganawada the woman's perspective, which led him to entrust women with the crucial roles of both selecting the Rotena Hiragano, and being caretakers of the land. Second, the peacemaker met a young Ganahanaga, according to some who also partly Onondaga, Chief Oweno Wethetha, Hatha Wetha. Sorry, these are all indigenous names. Who was experiencing deep grief after losing his wife and daughters during the previous mentioned war. Dangana Weda's words of condolence to Halawetha invited him to clear his eyes, ears, and throat to overcome his sorrows, would provide the basis for ending the civil war through the establishment of the Great Law of Peace. Together they all set out to convince the 5 warring nations to stop their fighting and bundle their arrows together into an unbreakable alliance. After the Great Law of Peace, that's not the Great Law of Peace. After the Ganhanaga first joined the peace, all other Iroquois nations accepted it until only the Onondaga and their leader, Thadidoga, who left to convince. Another person, here comes another one. Thadidoga was told that if he joined the alliance, he would become the Rotana Hanagana Shoni, Confederacy's great chief, vested with the privilege of hosting grand councils in Onondaga, and would have a final say in any decisions. However, this privilege was annulled by the fact that for a decision to be made, a strict consensus had to be reached between each and every one of the 49 matrilineal families represented by the Haudenosaunee. The Hadawetha combined the snakes out of the Thadowedagano hair, and words of condolence were spoken to allow him to overcome his anger, distributing the Haudenosaunee within the longhouse between 3 sides, the elder brothers, the younger brothers, and the firekeepers. The Great Law of Peace became intricate system of decentralized and consensual decisions making protocols, comparing 117 articles enclosed in wampum belts. The women retained a powerful role in this system, as they both selected the Rotenera Gono and could depose them with the help of the warriors if they were found to be violating the Great Law of Peace. Their constitutions allowed the Rotenan Ganashoni to become a powerful confederacy, extending the rafters of its near-ending longhouse to all nations who desire to join their alliance. 1534, first contact with French and Iroquoian people. During this first voyage into the St. Lawrence River Valley, French explorers Jacquin Cartier met the St. Lawrence Iroquoian and the Stadacona Irvi, ignoring Donnaconnon's warnings. Carter pushed further downstream to the Iroquoian village he understood to be Honchekalagang, where today stands so-called Montreal. Cartier reacted to Donnaconnon's discontent by capturing 10 prisoners, including Donnaconna and his sons, bringing them to meet King Francisco I in France. Donnaconna and the others Iroquoian captives died in Europe. Sad. 1603, Samuel de Champlain. Nearly 70 after after Jacquin Cartier, a second French explorer, Samuel de Champlain, entered the St. Lawrence River and the previous Iroquoian inhabitants of what would become Montreal were no longer there. Historians often suggest that these original inhabitants were not related to the actual Iroquois Confederacy, but indigenous oral traditions suggest that the St. Lawrence Iroquoians had simply temporarily moved to other parts of their territory in accordance with the semi-sedentary ecological pattern practiced in this region. Their villages were abandoned every 15 to 20 years to let the land replenish before returning a few generations later. 1608, establishment of Quebec City. Samuel D. Kaplan established the French settlement of Quebec. 1609, Samuel D. Kaplan kills Iroquois chiefs. Accompanying Wadat, Anyun, and Anishinaabe warriors down the Rachilui River, Samuel D. Dale Kaplan stumbled on a Iroquois party and fired his abequus at them, killing at least 3 chiefs. French-Iroquois relations never recovered from the violence of this first encounter. 1613, the two-row wampum, first exchanged with Dutch settlers in the early 17th century. The Taugati wampum belt displays 2 parallel purple lines on a white background, symbolizing a river where the indigenous people's canoe and a settler's people's ship sail side by side. As the alliance belt, it suggests that both parties can only advance in the same direction if they refrain from encroaching on each other's path, thus precluding both assimilation, policies, and cultural appropriation. It requests that the Europeans keep their culture, language, laws aboard their own ship, which is said to be docked to Turtle Island through the hemp chain, and later an iron chain for the French, a silver one for the British, and a gold one for the Americans. In this sense, the Ganati allowed Europeans to stay in the waterways, providing they did not take roots on the land. Yet the Ganhokui people also considered the Tanganwati to be a wider diplomatic principle understood as the law of the land, quote unquote, applying beyond relations with settlers to relations between among indigenous nations, gender, social groups, and even non-human beings, advocating reciprocity and respect of differences in all relationships. This law of the land was extended to Europeans when they were first encountered, although its date is contested by some historians. The 1613 Towetganetgetchi treaty between the Rotenonganashini and Dutch merchants Jacob Eckles is often considered as the origins of the Tanganjit. 1640 to 1704, the Beaver Wars. Beginning in the 1640s, war broke between the French alongside their Anishinaabe, Wandata, Huron, or other indigenous allies, and the Haudenosaunee, backed by the English to gain control of the beaver pelts, trade routes connecting the Great Lakes to the St. Lawrence and the Hudson River Valley. In addition to the economic motives, demographics, losses due to war and epidemics within indigenous communities were also a determinant factor in what a historian calls the, quote, mourning wars, end quote, where captives were taken back to communities to replace deceased family members. The large scale of these adoptions, integrating thousands of captives into the Haudenosaunee society, transforming many of their villages into multinational settlements. Jesuit Gabriel Lament estimated that only 20% of their inhabitants were of Iroquois origins in 1660, while Paul Le Jeune counted no less than 11 ethnic groups of Seneca villages. Within the course of a few years, adoptees would become equally fervent Haudenosaunee warriors, taking back captives in their turn, while also bolstering the Confederacy diplomatic capacity with some peoples like the Weta were almost entirely wiped out during these wars, as large portions of their populations were absorbed by the Haudenosaunee. 1642, establishment of Montreal. Paul Comedy de Maisonneuve, can't say his name, don't give a fuck, established Ville Marie, which would become Montreal, as a provocation against the Haudenosaunee. What's up?
I think I just wanted to make sure it was clear that people don't recognize this. So even when they took captives, they joined the nation as a part of the people. They gained the same rights as everybody else. They even joined the Warrior Society. That's exactly what they said. So like even when a captive would be taken back, they weren't put into slavery or anything. They actually joined the people as a part of the people.
That's the integration. That's the same with the indigenous societies in Africa. They did the same thing. They took their captives and incorporated them into their societies and their family too. So like, yeah, like it's just, this is like the indigenous way. And it seems like it's a universal thing too, because you can, like even like Walter Rodney recognizes that part too, when it comes to like, slave captives. You know what I mean? Thank you, by the way. Let me read this again. I don't know where it's, okay. So 1492, the establishment of Paul Comedy de Massira established Ville Marie, which would become Montreal, as a provocation against the Haudenosaunee, whose presence in the St. Lawrence and Ottawa River Valley was threatening French occupation. Maisonneuve wanted to establish a utopian town where the French would live alongside Christianized indigenous inhabitants, thus securing the latter support. Course. 1645. I think it's Quetzalcoatl Truce. Mohawk leader Quetzalcoatl traveled to Trois Rivières when the largest commercial outpost in North America to propose a peace treaty with the French, standing on the prow of French ships, which escorted him, his body entirely covered in wampum. Quetzalcoatl delivered a powerful speech on the behalf of the Haudenosaunee League, metaphorically proposing to clear the rocks and obstacles in the St. Lawrence River to allow free passage between French settlers and the Haudenosaunee territories. Quetzalcoatl's peace proposal was short-lived. However, as a Haudenosaunee soon discovered that the French had secretly been mapping extent routes to Iroquois, proving them their invasive intentions. 1660, Wendat, dispersion and integration. Speak of the Iroquoian language and sharing many traditions with Iroquois, such as building longhouses. The Wendat mainly lived along the north shore of Lake Ontario and near the Georgian Bay. As their French allies would have give guns to the Wendat if they converted to Christianity, they were bound to suffer important losses when the Haudenosaunee launched a 1,000-man strong attack on them on March 16, 1659. Dispersed from their homelands, many Watet were sheltered in French Catholic missions, including on the island of Orleans near Quebec City. The Haudenosaunee and particularly the Mohawks and the Onondaga approached them, proposing to integrate them into the Confederacy and promised to build new homes in their territories to welcome them. Many Wadat accepted the proposal, bolstering the ranks of the Haudenosaunee with their people, and added the fresh cultural perspectives of the Watat to that of the Haudenosaunee. Most Wadats adoptees continue to nurture diplomatic relationships with their former kin as adoptions, including of the Iroquois captives, as also widespread in their own culture. During the second half of the 17th century, Iroquois diplomacy led to a significant expansion of their Confederacy alliance networks. New Haudenosaunee settlements were established on the north shore of Lake Ontario to circumvent French influencers in the region. Oh my gosh, here we go. The Winganara and the Aragarana and the Chinnagantan and the Shigagawak territories were conquered as the Haudenosaunee pushed against the Illiniquik in the west. According to Paul Lee June, the Iroquois tongue was understood no less than 1,200 miles away from their homelands, becoming a diplomatic lingua franca of sort. Iroquois' expansion through the diplomatic and military means compelled the French to accept peace in 1707 and 1701. 1664, New Amsterdam becomes New York. Without any bloodshed, the colony of New Netherlands surrendered its territory to the English, who threatened them with an impressive armada at the gates of New Amsterdam, thereafter known as New York. In 1666, Carrigan on Salaries campaign, as Iroquois raids on French and native allied settlements were successful, securing Haudenosaunee control over the fur trade corridors from the Great Lakes to the Hudson River Valley. The French began conspiring to retaliate against them. In 1665, the French King Louis the 14th sent 1,200 fresh troops from the Carrigan Salaries regiment to help the French colonial assert its control over the region. Lieutenant General Alexander de Provely, Marquis de Tracy, the Governor de Carcel, and Jean Talon, the Intendant of Justice, Police, and Finance, were sent to New France on the same boat which disembarked on September 12, 1665. In the harsh winter of 1666, the first expedition led by de Courcelles failed as the French were forced to withdraw, outnumbered by the Iroquois. On September 30th, 1666, the Marquis de Tracy tried again to lead the Carrigan Salaries regiment into the Mohawk River Valley. Every time I hear the Mohawk River Valley or Mohawks, I'm like, yeah, they're going to get owned. Even though the Mohawks had already strategically retreated from their villages, de Tracy adopted a scorched earth policy and burnt all dwellings and crops that could be found, seizing the empty villages in the name of the King of France. This led the Iroquois to sue for peace, and after the treaties signed with the Seneca in May and with the Oneida in July, a third treaty was signed in 1667, allowing French missionaries to move into the Iroquois villages. Okay, here we go. 1667, establishing of Gantakeki or Ganawaki and Ganankateski, Tangini. The costly Carrigan Salaries campaign was followed by a peace treaty between the French and the Iroquois, which would last until the 1680s. Its terms provide for the establishment of the Jesuit Catholic mission of Ganetiki in the present-day La Prairie, on the south shore of Montreal, which welcomed Haudenosaunee families as early as 1667. After several relocations upstream on the St. Lawrence River in 1676, 1690s, 1696, and 1716, partially because of the erosion of the soil, Ganetiki became Ganhanakwi, meaning art at the rapids, using the same name as Gendagowangoi, sorry, in the Mohawk River Valley. The French considered these new Catholic Iroquois communities in the St. Lawrence River as their allies, but in reality, these communities kept close ties with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, with whom they exchanged vital intelligence of upcoming raids and collaborated military by refusing to attack each other. French Sulpicians priests established a new Catholic mission near Mount Royal in present-day Montreal, the French settlement of Villa Maria. At first, the multi-ethnic mission, which included May-Watet and the Anishinaabe people. This settlement, which became known as the Gunhinkaneski, slowly became predominantly Haudenosaunee in 1721. Gunhinakaski was relocated to the North Shore of Montreal, and the La des Daou Montagues where it still exists today, while two turrets dated from the original Catholic mission of La Montague are still visible on Sherbrooke Street in present-day Montreal. Fuck them. That shit should go down. Does that mean that your territory, Quebec, is that close to New York?
Quebec is actually Haudenosaunee territory, yes.
Yeah, okay. 1575 to 1678, King Philip's War. 55 years after the first English colonists disembarked from the Mayflower, their colony of Plymouth would become the site of one of the deadliest wars of the colonial history of North America. While his father, Massasoit, had nurtured good relations with the Mayflower Pilgrims, things quickly deteriorated when his son, Metacom, called King Philip by the colonialists, became a chief of the Wapanakgan, the Wampananga. Whoa, that's weird. The colonialists regularly violated their alliance, confiscating the Wampanoag's guns and hearing 3 of them in 1675. In response to the Wampanoag's raids on settler homesteads, New England colonies mustered 1,000 militiamen and 150 native allies to attack the Neskaneks, the Noraganisets, who had given shelter to their Wampanoag neighbors, killing 600 natives in the Great Swamp Fighting of December 1675. After the Metcalm was killed by militiamen on August 12, 1676, the Wampanoags were defeated, their land confiscated, and many of them were enslaved by New England colonists, of course. 1677, the Lenape and the Sasaquan, the Hanakwan? The Sasawanaki. Naki. So it's the
Sasawanaki.
Sasawanaki.
No, Try
it again. Sorry.
I said, you said
It's the Lenape. That's the first word you messed up.
Oh, the Lenape. Okay. Lanape.
Yeah, Lenape.
Lenape. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Sesowanaki, right? Wanaki. Yeah.
Correct.
All right, cool. Peace with the French allowed the Haudenosaunee to concentrate their war efforts southwards, fighting their Anadadesti Kohangana, the Sesowanaki neighbors, who were supported by the then English colony of Maryland. As their warriors had dwindled down to a few hundred individuals, the Anadasti Haranan were compelled to surrender to the Iroquois and were included in the Covenant Chain Treaty that was reached between the Haudenosaunee and the colonies of Virginia and Maryland. Many Andanasti or Horanan settlement among the Mohawks in the Oneida, while their own allies, which included the Lenape, Delaware, became tributaries to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, remaining so until 1753. Along they did not have an equal voice in the Confederacy. Many individuals from tributary nations eventually became prominent leaders, some even rising to the position of war chief. So no matter what, you always are trying to find ways to integrate the lost tribes that have lost their ways to dealing with the colonialists.
Correct.
Always. And that's the thing too, like even in Revolution, Mao did that with some of the people that were fighting for the Kuomintang. When they gave up their arms, they integrated them, they restructured them, and they put them into the People's Army because that's reintegration, 1684, La Fame. When the Haudenosaunee were at war with the Illinois peoples, taking several hundred captives, in 1682, the Illinois French allies decided to retaliate by attacking the Onondaga. However, French Governor Antonio Leva-Brevetti del some French asshole, 1684 expedition ended up in a complete failure as his soldiers got sick with what is thought to have been a form of influenza as they were traveling to Onondaga. In the ironically named camp of La Fame on the south shore of Lake Ontario, La Barre had to accept humiliating terms of surrendering to the Onondaga leader, Oteriati, also known by the French as La Grangoulia, the Big Mouth, known for his rejection both of French and English hegemony. Nevertheless, La Barre's successor, Jacquin Ren de Barresi, some French asshole, would not abandon the project to invading Iroquoian writings to the French king that the only option for survival of New France was the exterminations of the Iroquois. 1687. How are we doing? We're doing great on time. Denonvilla's raid. After the failed 1666 and 1684 raids, the French tried once again to invade the Haudenosaunee territory, now targeting the Seneca, whose diplomatic efforts in the Great Lake regions threatened French trade networks. Denonville led more than 2,000 French Canadians and indigenous troops into the Iroquois, but as in 1666, Denonville's army found already empty villages, resolved to burn them along with the surrounding crops, pillaging graves to steal interred goods and erecting Louis the 14th's coats of arms at the entrance of the preemptively deserted villages. Notice that they can't fight them on. They have to go to empty villages to win. Fucking
They
weird.
weren't even winning. We were making strategic retreats so that they would only have the villages to burn. They didn't have the people to unalive. So they called them a victory, but in reality, it wasn't a victory.
Yeah. It was a strategic retreat. Yes, exactly that. Mohawk raid in Lenchen. Following Dononville's incursion into the Seneca territory, the French were forced to abandon their western outpost, including Fort Frontenac, which was besieged by the Haudenosaunee. On the morning of August 9th, 1689, 1,500 Mohawk warriors took the French by surprise by attacking the settlement of Lenchen near Montreal, killing and capturing at least 80 French settlers. Tensions were high as the War of the League of Augsburg, 1688 to 1697, a conflict mainly opposing France to the Habsburg control Holy Roman Empire, which is often cited as the First Global War, pushed the English and the French to resume their hostilities in North America. As the French set out to attack the English colony of Albany in January 1690, their Hanakwi and the Ganhastaki allies successfully deflected the French raid at, the Schenectady in order to save the lives of Mohawks living farther south in Albany. 1693, French raid the Mohawk country. The French invaded Iroquois once again as 652 soldiers, led the governor Louis de Badie, some other French fuckers, commonly known as Frontenac, penetrated Mohawk country, burned the towns of, here we go, the Gandoa Gawu, the Kanajiragahari, and the Tonondangan. The English, who had known that the invasion was going to happen, failed to inform the Mohawks of the upcoming danger. Yet neither the French nor the English knew that at the same time the Haudenosaunee delegates were visiting the French I can't say the word. Anishinaabe allies in the Great Lakes.
Anishinaabe.
What's it again? Anishinaabe. Oh, God.
It's Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe allies in the Great Lakes. Anishinaabe. I can't say it. To negotiate a separate peace agreement to share hunting grounds and trade routes following the principles of, quote, one dish, one spoon. Nice. You talked about one dish, one spoon. Lots.
Talk about it all the time because it's time teaching.
Yep. Seeking to circumvent the Haudenosaunee, increasingly successful diplomatic efforts of the Anishinaabe people around the Great Lakes, French governor Frontenac attempted another incursion into the Iroquois. Yet when his 2,550 men expedition reached the biggest Onondaga village, it was empty again. Even though the Oneida had agreed to join the alliance with the French and the Iroquois, who were living in Catholic missions around Montreal, a detachment led by Philippe de some other French dude was sent to Oneida on the same occasion, destroying all villages and fields on its way. Don't they get it? Like why? How come every time we show up, it's always empty? Like, don't you think they would be like, let's think about this. What's going on here? 1697, Treaty of Ryswick. Even though the September 1697 Treaty of Ryswick ended the war between France, and England in Europe, the treaty did not include the Iroquois and the fighting between North American indigenous nations continued. 1706, Great Peace of Montreal. Despite English efforts, we got 15 more minutes. Despite English efforts at blocking the Iroquois from negotiating their own peace treaty with France, the Haudenosaunee intensive efforts to secure peace with France, indigenous allies in the previous decades, finally bore fruit, stopping the Hanawaki on their way. Delegates from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, except the Mohawks, who representatives would arrive later, arrived in Montreal in July 1701 to meet French colonial representatives and more than 1,300 delegates from 39 indigenous nations to make peace at a time when Montreal counted only 1,200 inhabitants, featuring exchanges of prisoners of war and material goods. The peace conference established by the Haudenosaunee would remain neutral if the war was to ever break out again between the France and England. Although the latter were not informed of this decision, the peace talks also allowed the French to build a new western trading post in Detroit, and in exchange for the promise that the Haudenosaunee would freely circulate within within and beyond French outposts. The principle under which the peace could conclude was, quote, one dish, one spoon, tradition shared between the Haudenosaunee and the Ashwanabe people. Ashwanabe. I can't say it again.
Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe. People.
Anishinaabe.
Shinabi. I'm having a hard time with this one. I'm so sorry. Shinabi. Which implies an agreement to share hunting grounds across nations. The 57th Garananai, or Wampum, of the Hanegankowi states that the Confederacy chiefs, quote, shall eat together from one bowl and feast of cooking beaver tails. While they are eating, they are to use no sharp utensils, for if they were to accidentally cut one another, bloodshed would follow. Oh my God! They're already... wow. Shinabe. 2014. 1704 Deerfield raid. On February 9th, 1704, during the Queen Anne's War, 1701 to 1713, French troops accompanied by Wabanaki of the Pocomoke and the St. Lawrence River Valley, Iroquois warriors raided the English settlement of Deerfield in Massachusetts, killing 47 colonists and taking 112 captives to Montreal. Some died on the way, others were ransomed back to their family, but some were also adopted by the St. Lawrence River Valley Mohawks, including Eunice Williams, a daughter of Reverend John Williams, who chose to stay with their adopters in spite of her father's attempts to repatriate her. Reverend Williams accounts of his own capacity. The Redeemed Captive was widely read when it was published in 1707. 1721, the Gunhanhestiki moves to the north shore of Montreal. Most Haudenosaunee and, oh my gosh, Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe. Anishinaabe. There's no shish in there. It's Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe. My tongue, my lips. Sorry. Residents of The La Montagne Catholic Mission on the island of Montreal moved to a new location on the Lac des Dalous Montagues, where the Gani Hatashki still sits today. Some of its, oh my gosh, not again, Anishinaabe, the Nipissing, and other non-Haudenosaunee inhabitants would stay in Ganishki. The Nipissing and other non-Haudenosaunee inhabitants would stay in Ganishkan for only a few weeks each year, spending most of their time hunting in the woods. They would end up migrating northward towards Ottawa River watershed during the 19th century. Here we go. Tuscarora. All right, 1722, the Tuscarora integrated into the Haudenosaunee. The Iroquois language, Tuscarora people, had to leave their homeland in present-day North Carolina after being attacked by English colonialists in the 1711 to 1713 war. Taking refuge in Pennsylvania, they formally requested to join the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which welcomed them as younger brothers, sponsored by the Oneida. After the five-nation confederacy became the six-nation confederacy. 1754 to 1763, French and Indigenous War, 7 Years' War. As a overseas extension of the 7 Years' War raged in Europe, the French and Indigenous War pitted English colonies against French colonies, along with their respective indigenous allies on Turtle Island. The neutrality which the Haudenosaunee had generally observed since the Great Peace of Montreal of 1704 crumbled under the pressure of war. Most Haudenosaunee nation allied with the British, save for the Oneida and the Seneca factions, while the French fought alongside the Anishinaabe people. Oh my gosh. I'm just going to piss you off all day today. I don't want to piss you off. I really don't. I don't want to make anybody mad. I'm
going to be honest. I'm not mad. I'm just trying to help you learn it. It's Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe.
Perfect.
Anishinaabe. The Wadet warriors from the Great Lakes of Ohio country. The North American War ended in 1760 following the battle plans of the Abraham in Quebec City, the British general Amherst's conquest of Montreal, but the fighting continued in Europe until the signature of the Treaty of Paris in 1763, with the French driven out of the northeastern part of the continent. The Iroquois could no longer take advantage of colonial rivalries and had to deal with a single colonizer. 1755 established the Aquinacy. Oh, I must have got that one right. Aquinacy. In the mid 1750s, about 30 Haudenosaunee families left Ganhanawaki, where available lands were setting scarce and migrated. Okay, and migrated 70 miles upstream to a new location along the St. Lawrence River, led by John and Zachariah Tarbell, two brothers whose father was an English colonialist who had been adopted by the Iroquois in 1707, and St. Regis mission of Aquinacy was officially established by French Jesuits in 1755. 1763, the Royal Proclamation. We'll read a couple more. We got 5 more minutes, but I think we're doing good. Lumby. After winning the war against France, George III. What's up?
The Chicken Lumbee statement was specifically to the colonizers taking over the Tuscarora's territory and then made themselves to be known as the Lumbee, which is a tribe that's quote unquote recognized by the United States, but was set up by settlers.
Jesus Christ. After winning the war against France, George III, the King of Britain, feared the indigenous nation in the West, who were used to dealing with the French, who formed a coalition against the British. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 sought to stabilize the relationship between the British Crown and the indigenous nations by formally forbidding colonialists from establishing new settlements on the west side of the Appalachian Mountains, considered, quote, indigenous territories. And that's what we're talking about. That's what was the counter-revolution of the War of 17. That's why they call it a counter-revolution, because the resistance of indigenous fighters trying to win back their territories, their lands, their sovereignty of the colonialists. So of course, that's the counter-revolution. 1763 and 1766. We'll read this last one and then I'll be done. After the French and Indigenous Wars, British General Geoffrey Amherst, known as... Wait, did I read this already? No, I have not. Known for dispersing indigenous peoples, drastically cut back the gifts which the French customarily distributed to indigenous nations in the West and to secure their allegiance, also restricting the sale of firearms and ammunition to indigenous peoples. Inspired the Lenape, Delaware spiritual leader, Neolin, who prophesied the traditional indigenous lifestyle would be integrally restored. Ottawa leader on the Pontiac created the Confederacy, regrouping many indigenous nations around the Great Lakes to drive the British out of the region. The Pontiac warriors seized 8 British forts and besieged Fort Detroit and Fort Pitt, where Amherst famously distributed blankets infected with smallpox to spread the disease among his indigenous enemies. British Superintendent of Indigenous Affairs William Johnson, who had built his personal mission in the Mohawk River Valley, was married to Molly Bryant, the sister of a Mohawk leader, Joseph Bryant, and spent a fortune on gifts for the Haudenosaunee to make sure that they would not join Pontiac. I don't want to say, I don't know if it's Pontiac or is it Pontiac? Pontiac? However, it looks like Pontiac, but however, the Seneca leader, the group keepers of the Haudenosaunee's western door, especially the Mingo Seneca, who had recently migrated to Ohio country, played a key role in the Pontiac alliance, the Pontiac's alliance. The insurrection ended in a stalemate as both parties stood their grounds on opposite sides of the Mississippi River. However, the conflict compelled the British to seek stability with Western indigenous nations by eliminating an encroachment of British settlers beyond the Appalachian Mountains, much to the settlers' discontent. And we'll stop there. And we're ending on page 295. 295. It sounds like you also had to deal with vacillators and capitulators too.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you had to deal with a lot of that because if the British and the French were no good, no matter what, but I'm assuming that you allied yourself with those people temporarily to gain something for yourself.
We made temporary allies with England at the time because the French were the ones that were trying to decide us specifically. So we made temporary allies with England to try and stop the ongoing genocide. But there was like qualifications. in some places at the first time, which was stated in the book, they offered to fund us with pew-pews if we converted to Christianity, which we were like, nope, that's not happening. So then that's why we started doing strategic retreats a lot, because we refused to convert to Christianity. But then there are some parts of the Haudenosaunee specifically that did do the conversion, so they could get pew-pews, and then they regretted giving us pew-pews because they found out how good we were with them. And yeah, that's basically how it went.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes sense because the biggest thing is your sovereignty and the determination is being threatened by these people and stuff like that. So it makes sense to do certain things in order to gain a foothold or an advantage, which is brilliant, honestly. Be honest with you, you know, and it is a worthwhile venture to actually check out the guerrilla warfare that indigenous people did, because indigenous people taught the colonists how to fight better, didn't they?
Yes.
You guys, you should have never done that. You should have just kept with their alignments and just fucked them all up. I'm just kidding.
Well, it was because here's what happened. So, like, when the French and English, so when we went to war, what happened is the English were like, okay, so here's the deal. They're scared of you because they tell their children about you like the boogeymen in the night. Like, we were a horror story for the French children in the night. So what they ended up doing was, they marched in a line towards each other, but then the English lines separated, and here came the Haudenosaunee sprinting down, like, through the lines, not doing line-to-line combat, but, like, straight up sprinting at them and coming out of the woods and stuff. So, like,
unknown territory where you have generations and generations of knowing your territory inside and out. You know what I mean? Like, you, like that, the failures of complete ambushes and stuff like that. It's like, now you need to figure out a different way of doing these things. Yeah. Wild.
Which was noted previously, where it was yesterday, where it was noted that the French just laid down their weapons and took off running because they didn't know what to do when the Haudenosaunee, we were just charging at them. Like, all right, you're fine. You want to stand in a line? We're coming right to you.
Yeah. All right. Well, does anybody else have anything to add? Do you have anything to add, Joe? Since you're up here?
I did. I wanted to add that I really enjoyed the reading today. And I was thoroughly enjoying everything, but you talked about everything, so.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, the reason I didn't have to correct you on the second thing you said, because you actually said it right. So you were right. You're like, I must have said that right because they didn't correct me. Yeah, that was the word that I was correcting you a lot yesterday, but it seems that you've actually gotten how to say it now, so I don't have to correct it. So the next step is the Anishinaabe people. Once we get that down, hey, I don't have to correct that one either. You're doing amazing because you're actually learning quicker than a lot of people pick it up. And a lot of people won't even try. They'll just be like, oh, okay, I'm just not going to say it. So, like, I give you tons of credit for even trying. Like, and the funny thing is every time you say the Peacemaker's name, you get closer and closer to saying it. And I'm like biting my tongue because I'm like, oh, you're so close, but I'm not going to tell you which time you're close on saying it. Because I'm like, I'm not going to promote you saying it, but if you do say it, I'm not going to, like, shun you for it. I'll actually be proud of you for saying it and picking it up on your own.
Well, thank you. Doodley, thank you so much. And, like, thank you for your help and, like, being patient with me, too. What's up, Doodley?
Hey, I just wanted to say that it's funny how, when, like, this has to do with the conversation that was happening around warfare. It's funny how when you reveal that it's not just like some game where there's etiquette, and it's actually revealed that, oh yeah, this is a place where people die unalive. It's funny how they just like went fucking nope and just got out of there. I just like
they thought they were gonna trap us, Doodley. It's like they thought they were being sneaky, but we already knew they were coming. So we were like, "All right, peace out. You can have the buildings. We can rebuild them." So later, they'd get upset because we weren't there for them to unalive.
It's because none of those villages is a permanent fixture, because they did mention that like indigenous people rotated out of that to replenish that place too. So it's not like you guys are beholden and like, oh my gosh, this is our foundation, we're so fucked. You're like, hey, we can rebuild, it's fine. We've done this before, you know?
Exactly. Like it's like we can just rebuild it. Like, all right, like you want to burn down the buildings, okay. We're just gonna move and then to a different area, and then if that's the issue, then whatever. Like we didn't hold on to like the personal possession of like, oh, this is our house. Oh no, what shall we do? Like a house can be rebuilt.
And that's the whole thing of the private property of like protecting private property in a sense. That's the whole capitalist thing. That's why I like the definition of abolition of private property, because everything is property, everything is monetized and commodified. You know what I mean? That's why we have like, oh, my house, when we're like, you know, you're alive. That's all that matters. We can rebuild this. It's fine. You know what I mean? That whole mentality should shift and change to a less material. I'll say it in this way. Being not in materialist in a way that of materials like the objective reality of the world, but materialist as in I have the best car in the world, and if I lose it, you know what I mean? Those kind of things, you know, like material possessions, you know,
Right.
Like the commodity fetishism.
Exactly that. All right, then. Thank you. You guys add so much and help me so much to retain and to drive a conversation. I appreciate it. I always cherish these times when y'all come up and help me out and draw me to a conversation. I appreciate you all.
Thank you for reading the book, and I hope you're enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it. I see a lot of parallels to like Mao Zedong's